when you're not a spooky girl, but you still want to take part in the Halloweeny stuff, you gotta figure something out. And I think I did. For this vlog, I'm going to be reading 3 witchy romances. They're going to be contemporary romances with a slightly fantastical feel to them, because that is the kind of stuff that I'm going to be reading in October. I am not a horror person. I am not a gore type of person. I'm not a romantasy type of person, but I am really into romance stories that have a little bit of a fantastical element to them at the moment. The first one I'm going to start with is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I've had this on my side for such a long time, and I know so many people who have read it and have absolutely loved it. There's a bunch of people in my YouTube subscription feed who've absolutely adored this book, and it does sound like the kind of cozy vibes that I'm looking for. It's about Mika, who is one of Britain's only witches, and I feel like it's a very secretive thing in that you don't tell people who you are, you don't share your magical powers with others, you just very much kind of lead a solitary life. Until one day, Mika, who puts videos on YouTube about her being a witch, but in such a satirical way that people don't realize she's actually being serious. She puts all these videos up and it catches the eye of some people who ask her to come to Nowhere House and to join their coven, I believe. I'm really interested to see what this is going to be like. I have such high hopes for this one, and I really hope it's not going to let me down. I have got 2 other books in mind for this. I really, really want to get to A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. I have got such high hopes for that one as well. It kind of sounds to me like that episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch where they make a man out of pancake batter, and then Sabrina brings him with her to the homecoming ball or like the Halloween ball as a date or something like that. It's kind of got that same vibe in that Mariel, who's the main character, is really big into baking, and while she's baking one evening she accidentally summons a demon who stays with her for most of the book because they have a soul tie now. But I can't decide what I'm going to do by the third one. I've either got Rewitched by Lucy Beth Wood, which is supposed to be such a lovely and comforting and autumnal book, and apparently has got my name in it. But I also have got my sights on Spellbound by Gretchen Rue, which I got a NetGalley copy of last year and never read it, but I feel like now is the time to actually start that series. So there's 3 in the series out so far. I've also got Hex in the City by Kate Johnson, and I did try and read that last year as an audiobook, and I couldn't get into the vibe of the story that way. But maybe if I read it with my eyeballs, I'd have a better time than if I was reading it with my eardrums. Let's see. I'm going to figure out what one the last book in the vlog is going to be. We'll get there when we get there, but first of all, let's actually get started with The Very Secret Society. Same day, same position, different clothing. I have managed to get 50% of the way through The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I am having such a good time with this book. It is slightly different to how I thought that it would be. I didn't know that Mika was coming to Nowhere House basically to teach 3 young witches how to harness their powers and how to control their powers and basically how to be adult witches. And everything about the witching world is secretive, so nobody in her life knows that she's a witch. She doesn't stay in one place for anything longer than 6 months. She doesn't harness any friendships or relationships. She doesn't really have any kind of a support system apart from her adoptive mother. I'm so intrigued by this book. I really am. I'm having such a good time with it. I also adore the cast of side characters. I would kill and die for Ian. I think he is so wonderful. He's like that grandfather that everybody wishes that they have, that when you come in the house, he would just pull up a chair beside him and sit you down with a bag of sweets and a huge batch of stories to tell you. I also really like Jamie. I feel like there's going to be a kind of a romance between these two, but it's very, very slow burn at this stage. I'm about 50% of the way through and they haven't even locked eyes with one another. But I think that that's okay, because I don't think that the romance should be the main focus of this book. I feel like this book needs to be about the 3 girls, Rosetta, Terracotta and Araminta. It needs to be about those 3 learning how to become witches and learning how to control their powers. I am so invested in what they're going to do with these 3 girls. I've had such a great time with this. And I know so many people who have read it and said that it's a me book. And I know so many people who I've read, like
Goodreads reviews or I've watched them doing wrap-ups on BookTube, and it sounded like a me book, and they are so full on correct.
Update the first. I have finished with The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This is going to be a Halloween staple for me. I absolutely, utterly adored this book. There were a couple of things towards the end that I probably should have seen coming, but just never registered in my head. There were a couple of things that, when you start to realize the pieces that come into place, that was incredibly obvious. And Captain Obvious over here should have picked up on it but didn't. This is going to be a Halloween staple for me. This is going to be the kind of book that I'm going to go back to every single October to get into the Halloween mood. Much the same as I read A Christmas Carol every single Christmas Eve. This is going to get me in that festive feeling. There was a romance in this, but I'm quite glad that that wasn't the main focus of this book. I absolutely loved the cozy vibes of this book. I am particularly glad that the romance pretty much took a back seat. It was still there, it was still kind of bubbling and simmering away, but it definitely wasn't the bread and butter of this book. When Jamie and Mika did actually get together, it felt a little bit kind of rushed and clunky. So I don't entirely know if that sex scene is something that I wanted to have in this book. I think it would have been totally fine without it. It would have been perfectly readable still, but it was still a really good book. So now that that one is done, let's move on to book number 2. I am going to pick up A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Holy after work today. I am so intrigued by this one. This is one that I've seen around so many times as well. I've seen a lot of people recommending it. Victoria, from what Victoria read, actually put this on my 12 and 24 list. So that is another reason that I need to read this. And this is about a young witch named Mariel who is on course to become the family's most powerful witch, but her spells and her incantations don't particularly go to plan. So one evening while she is baking, she is trying to summon Flower, but instead summons Ozrath, who is a demon, and now there is a soul tie between the two of them. So until she has completed a set of challenges or tasks, he can't leave her. So she has to pretend to date him so that nobody is getting suspicious as to why he's hanging around. I'm intrigued. I hope it's still got that same cozy vibe that I just got from The Very Secret Society, because that was such a hug in a book. It was like a warm and comforting blanket wrapped around me. And I'm so hopeful that that's exactly what I'm going to pick up here. Hello, hi. While I'm making breakfast, let's talk A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon. This is not exactly the book that I thought it was going to be when I was going into it. I had really expected the cozy vibes of this book, and okay, you get them. It is really a cozy fantasy, but it's a lot more smutty than I was expecting it to be. And I think maybe I'm comparing it a little bit too much to The Very Secret Society, because that was the cozy vibe that I was looking for, because that did have what I was looking for in this book. But I feel like this one is a completely different vibe. I also feel like there is so much happening in this book that I'm almost struggling to keep up. What I am noticing in this book is that there's a really difficult family dynamic between Mika and her mother. I absolutely do not enjoy reading this woman. I don't enjoy reading about Diantha. I think she's a horrible person. I think she's so evil to her own daughter. And it's difficult to read that kind of relationship at times. It's difficult to read a relationship where somebody who is so vibrant in other areas of their life has basically been so squashed down in other areas. I'm going to keep going with it, but I just don't think that this is the book that I was hoping it would be. Hello, welcome to Monday morning. Last night, I started up with Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This was kind of the placeholder as to what I wanted for the last book of this vlog, but there were other honourable mentions that I was going to give. So I could have gone for Hex in the City by Kate Johnson. I could have gone back and done a reread of The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. There were a couple of like witchy romances that I just knew that I wanted to pick up. But Rewitched was really winning it out for me for a couple of reasons. The first one is that in the Golden Runes chat in Fablin, Caitlin has been reading it and she told me that there is actually a character called Aoife in this. And I don't know about you, but when I see my name in a book, it's like kryptonite. I have to read it. Particularly because my name isn't so common and isn't so frequent in books. It was in The Guest List by Lucy Foley. It was in Instructions for a Heatwave by Maggie O'Farrell. And when I see my name in a book, I get really excited about that little connection that so many other people, like the Hannahs of the world and the Emmas and the Graces and the Lucys, they all get to have. But because my name is so specifically Irish, and for a lot of non-Irish people, very difficult to pronounce just from looking at it, it's just a little bit more exciting. So that was the reason that I went to pick it up. So I started it last night and I think I'm at around 20% or so. I'm on my lunch break now, as you can tell by the fact that I have knitting in my hand, and I'm going to pick up the rest of the audiobook for a little bit longer. I'm having a relatively good time. It is quite early doors still. As I said, I haven't even reached the 20% mark yet. But what I have read, I have been really enjoying. Belle, or Belladonna, is approaching her 30th birthday, and she is a witch, but you are not supposed to really tell people that that's who you are. Belle has been practicing her magic, but not really harnessing it. She's done like a couple of quick spells, like to have her tea stirred while she's in a different part of the room, or to have the books that are in the bookshop that she works in, to have them put back in an orderly fashion, which I think is really interesting to see and to read, but I feel like she could be doing a little bit more of it. And it turns out that the coven that she's in also feel like she could be doing a little bit more with it, because she is going through a series of tests and tasks to see if she is able to keep her powers after her 30th birthday. And it looks like she's going to have to give them up. So that means that she's going to have to go back to being a non-witch like she was before her 15th birthday. And I'm so interested and intrigued to see what that means for her life when she has to live basically as a mortal. I'm so intrigued by this book. I've seen so many people have talked about it as well. My friend Charlotte from Coiny Reads has just recently done a kind of a video review of it. And I didn't watch the whole lot of it because I didn't particularly want to be spoiled by it. But what I saw of it, she did have quite a good time with it. So let's see what kind of a time Aoife has with it. I want to slovenly girl couch, but instead we're going to hot girl walk, and I'm going to bring Rewitched with me. I'm at about 60 or so % of the book, so it feels like the right time to tell you how it is I'm getting along with it and what my feelings about this book are. I am having a really good time with this one. It's a little bit chaotic, it's a little bit all over the place, and there are times of this book where I'm not entirely sure what is going on. But overall, I'm genuinely really enjoying this. So it is about Belle, or to give her full name, Belladonna Blackthorn. And on her 30th birthday, she is invited up to, I think it's called Hawthorne House or Haythorne House, where she is going to have to go through a trial to make sure that she is allowed to keep her magic, because she is basically worthy of being a witch. However, she fails this test, and I mean in spectacular fashion. She has almost a massive panic attack as soon as she gets to the first trial, and I feel like that just completely puts her off kilter for the rest of it. But a couple of days later, she's kind of saved by one of the witches that was on the trial's kind of judging board, and they tell her that if she takes part in these 6 kind of other tasks that she has to do before Halloween, she gets them all done, she gets her magic back. One of her tasks is to go and live with a guy called Astorius, who is basically a recluse in society. He's been accused of some really awful crimes. He's been accused of murder, and he hasn't really kept in touch with society. And it's so sweet the moment that she first meets him and goes to his house. He just looks at his cupboard, and I was coincidentally at my cupboard at the same time. And he just looks and says, "It's been such a long time since I've had to take out a second mug to give to somebody for tea." And then I was staring at my almost menagerie of mugs just hoarded in my kitchen cupboards, and I thought it was so sweet and so gentle of him. I am expecting that something is going to come to light about him,
or we might find out kind of a backstory as to what has happened to him previously. We might go a little bit more in depth here. But this connection that Astorius and Belle have is absolutely wonderful. There's also a really great connection between Belle and her mother. Her mother was summoned as part of another spell that Belle was trying to do in order to bring her magic back. And that went really wrong. And you kind of get the feeling that somebody's trying to sabotage Belle. I don't know if it's because she's part of a really big magic lineage, or if her powers, if she gets them back, will be too powerful. I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning is, and I'm pretty sure we're going to find that out while I'm out on my walk. This is very reminiscent of the 1990s. Like, there was a specific reference to a children's witchy TV show from ITV in like the late 90s, early noughties that I used to watch all the time, called Isadora. And one of her catchphrases was, "Izzy Wizzy, let's get busy." And one of the witches in this book says, "Izzy Wizzy, let's get busy." I had whiplash from looking over and being like, did I hear what I think I just heard? And I had a second chance of that because my name was mentioned in this book. And I was admittedly kind of deep in a research project at work. And then I was at home by myself and I heard my name being called out from my phone. And I just went, huh? So I went back. I got a screen grab of it so that I could like play it to friends and family later on. It was so cool. I'm intrigued to see where this book is going to go. I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen by the end of it. So I think what I need to do now is put my walking shoes on and get out the door. I have finished with Rewitched. I finished it this morning while I was listening to it and watching some sprints with my friend Crystal from Bomb Book Reviews. I had such a good time with this book. It is exactly the kind of cozy, like fun, Halloween-y vibes that I wanted from a book. And I'm so glad that this vlog kind of had like a U kind of a turn, and that it started out super good and it started out super cozy. Then I kind of dipped a little bit with A Witch's Guide to Fate Dating a Demon, but this brought it straight back up. I listened to it, a lot of it as well, while I was on a walk yesterday evening after work. And a lot of things started to slot into place correctly. I had a feeling that we would find out a lot about Artorius' past as we got towards the end of the book, and that is pretty much exactly what happened. I would kill and die for that man. I think he's so wonderful. He's so welcoming. He's like that kind of doddery old grandfather or uncle that you have just around the house. I think he was such a wonderful character. He had definitely been taken advantage of for quite a lot of his earlier life, for quite a lot of the earlier stages of the book. But he was a really great mentor to Belle as well. He really taught her how to harness her powers. And he really taught her and drove home the idea of your magic is your own, which I thought was a really sweet thing for him to teach her, especially when we find out some things that have happened to him. There were a couple of characters that I probably should have been a little bit more wary of than I was previously. We do find out that one of them has been kind of living a double life and has been doing a lot of shady things in the background that shouldn't have been happening. And I really should have known that this was coming. I really should have sat back and kind of put pieces together. But I am so bad at doing that, even with thrillers. Of the witchy romances, I actually think that this was the least romance focused of the three books. And I'm really glad that that was the situation, because much like with The Secret Society, I needed this to be a book where we were concentrating on Belle. I needed this to be a book where she was focused on herself, where she was focused on getting her magic back, where she was focused on harnessing her powers. I didn't need it to be a book where she and Ruin were falling in love and thinking about what the other was doing and worrying and wondering about signs and signals and, oh, I touched his hand, I didn't really mean to touch his hand. That's not the kind of book that I wanted to go in here for, and I'm really glad that that's not the kind of book that it turned out to be. If Lucy Jane Wood writes another book, either in this series or completely unconnected, I am in it. I'm on board. I would really love to read more of her writing. There was also, at the end of the audiobook that I was listening to, there was a really great interview of Lucy Jane Wood and with the narrator of the audiobook, who I also have to give commendment to. She really brought all of the characters to life. She made the story sparkle. She made it such an interesting thing to listen to. There were a couple of other witchy romances that I just didn't get a chance to get to.
So I'm going to have to put them maybe on the back burner for next year, or I'll see if I can slot them in somewhere else. But if you're looking for a witchy romance this year for Halloween, these are definitely the ones that I would recommend. If I was giving you just one from this pile though, I would absolutely definitely recommend that you go with The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. We've come to the end. We've got all 3 of the books that we wanted to read. We eventually picked out what the 3 books were, and I think we've had a pretty good time with it leading up into Halloween. If you would love to leave me a comment, but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me a witchy emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.